Hello, and welcome to my next instalment of Meet the Author. Today, I am sitting down with the incredible and the inspirational Michelle Obama, and we're going to be talking about her book, Becoming. Hello, Mrs. Obama. Is it okay if I call you Michelle?
Of course.
Thank you
Holly,
very
how are you?
much.
It's great to see you again.
You too. I'm really good. Thank you very much. I just want to say how much I absolutely love this book. Like, you're the most phenomenal storyteller, and I know that's what you're like from your personality. You're very open and honest, and that really shines through in every little bit of the book. From the very first moment, first chapter, I was sucked in, especially because I was listening to you on audiobook, and I was listening to you tell me the stories of your life. And I really felt like I was very much there. So well done. It's something you should be really proud of. It's absolutely brilliant. I'm not the only one that thinks it's great. You have sold 2 million copies in the US alone.
Yeah.
Best-selling author of 2018 in 2 weeks.
Did not anticipate any of that. So
it's amazing.
It's exciting. It's good to know that the book is resonating with so many different people. I think that was my hope all along, that the story would connect with people of all backgrounds all over the world. So I'm excited.
It is brilliant. And for anyone out there that hasn't read the book, please get out and buy it because it's absolutely amazing. As I was listening, I was writing down lots of questions. So can we get to it and answer some of them? Your words are so beautiful, so I'm going to just quote some of them back to you. I grew up with a disabled dad in a too small house with not much money, in a starting to fail neighborhood. And I also grew up surrounded by love and music in a diverse city, in a country where an education can take you far. I had nothing, or I had everything. It depends on which way you want to tell it. And tell it you did. You absolutely bear your soul in this book. And at times that must have been quite painful and difficult. How did you go about approaching writing something so deeply personal?
Well, part of the thinking was that if I was going to tell my story, because a lot of people are curious, how did a girl, a working class kid from the south side of Chicago, wind up as the first lady with all the accomplishments that we had? And in thinking about that, I thought, well, the 8 years in the White House is the least of my story. You know, it doesn't really explain anything. So I felt like I had to give people the context of my life. I had to introduce them to that little girl, Michelle Robinson, and give them a sense of what the sights and sounds of that little girl's life was like, how she played, how she was loved, you know, who she interacted with, some of her hardships, some of her failings, because I really do think that that's how we get to know people. You know, too often we focus on what I call our stats. What school did you go to? Where did, you know, what's your occupation? But the truth is, to really get to know people, we have to go deep into those stories. And I felt that if I wanted people to get to know me, I had to share everything. So that was part of the thinking, and that's really the way I've lived my life. I learned that on the campaign trail in Iowa, when I had to explain myself to predominantly white communities who hadn't been exposed to black folks, let alone tall black people named Obama. So I had to find out how to open myself up in a way that people could connect with me and then be able to hear me. So this book is really just an extension of that belief that we have to share those stories with each other if we're really going to break down the barriers.
And you shared them so well. And I feel like your mother, Marion Robinson, had a really big part to play in that. She says, as parents, you're not raising babies, you're raising adults. How do you feel in reality? What did that actually mean for you and your brother Craig when you were growing up?
Oh, that meant that our voices had real value in our house. There are some people who raise kids and they use the philosophy, kids are to be seen and not heard. And it was just the opposite for us. I mean, we sat around the dinner table at night and we told stories about our day. And when you grow up with parents who not only respect your voice, but enjoy your voice, that's how I felt in our home, that my parents thought we were brilliant and funny, and they wanted us to, you know, I say in the book, my parents knew that there was a flame in me that they wanted to keep lit. And that's what I call Zen neutrality in parenting. I describe my mother in that way. It's that gift of understanding that to empower children in the long term, you have to give them that space and that room to be themselves when they're young. So ours was a household full of lots of conversation, lots of debate, one-upping each other in storytelling. And that wasn't just true in our immediate family, but we grew up in a vast extended family that I describe in detail, grandparents and aunts and uncles and cousins and second cousins. And when you grow up in a big family, you find that you have to, use your voice to get a word in edgewise. And I grew up in a family of storytellers. So
that's why you're so good at this storytelling.
It's probably part of the reason why I'm good at it. I also describe myself as that little girl. When I was young, I was very much in my head. I talk about how I played with my dolls and I loved to create this imaginary world, and I could spend hours on end just playing alone. And in thinking about this question, I think that because I spent so much time in my head before I was ready to get out there and interact, I lived with stories in my head. I could play all day. So storytelling for me is a way that I can sort out the world and have it make sense. And it was always that way for me, even as a child. But the parenting really matters. And I try to share that with the audiences that I talk to. We have to give children the space to be and to be who they are. And as a mother, kids come here with their own personality.
Bringing up twins at the same time, they get the exact same everything, but they're completely different people.
Right. And I think my parents sort of understood that. So they didn't expect the same thing from me as they did from my brother. But they did treat us as equals, which I think played a big role in me being a powerful woman with a powerful voice. I was used to being respected in my home. So I went out into the world and I expected that same treatment from others.
Wonderful. You've had many different careers in your life. You attended Princeton and then became a high-flying lawyer. You were a powerhouse at City Hall, director of a variety of community not-for-profits, and then a reluctant political campaigner. You call this swerving, and I absolutely love that term because I had a dramatic swerve myself where I trained to be a doctor, worked as a doctor, and then became a businesswoman. And so I completely understand how dreams and aspirations can change. You talk about the worries that you had about other people judging your career choices, especially leaving law. How did you overcome that? And what would you say to others facing the same dilemma?
Well, the first thing that I had to overcome was my own guilt. Because when you spend so much time and money, in my case, taking out student loans, I came out of law school with a lot of debt. The notion that I wouldn't want to invest financially to recoup that that initial investment was a struggle for me, especially growing up as a working class kid. I talk about the conversation I had with my mother where I was trying to break down how I wasn't passionate about my career and how I feel guilty talking to a woman who had sacrificed so much for me and probably never had the luxury of thinking about something as trivial as passion. So explaining that to a working class family, how you're going to walk away from a solid career and a solid income to, pursue what's deep in your heart. My parents didn't.
And were they your biggest worry when you decided to leave?
Initially they were, but also it was part of the challenge was what else was I going to do? That's part. I describe myself as a box checker. Because that's how we teach kids. It's like there's a path. You pick a career when you're 7. You study that career in elementary school. You go to college. You get a major. And life choices are not that orderly. But that's how we train kids. And I was right on that path. And I knew how to achieve. I knew how to get A's and how to get to the next level. But no one taught me how to dig deep inside my soul and figure out what I cared about. And we don't talk to kids about what they care about. We talk about what they should major in, what they should study. And those two things are very different. So part of the struggle was I had to relearn how to educate myself about who I was School didn't teach me that. All those degrees, all those fancy schools didn't help me connect into who I needed to be as a person. So I had to rewind all that learning.
And it's such a shame because the education systems really should start that from the very beginning.
Yeah, we struggle, you know. I mean, I think the challenge is that education systems are developed for masses of teaching, but every kid is so different. And if you don't have the resources to individualize the educational curriculum, then you're really pushing kids through a funnel that may not fit them. And that's something that I worry about and see now in my girls.
Especially with the standardized testing and having to pass the exams and get on to the next level. And
This notion that you're going to learn something that every kid is going to learn in the same way at the same time is disastrous. And it creates box checkers who then go on to careers that may not fulfill them, and then they're not good at it. So the tough part for me was relearning all, you know, and figuring all that out on my own. And so I had to find people who could help me. You know, I did what I called informational interviews. I had to go out and just meet people who were doing all sorts of things that seemed interesting to figure out what I cared about. Was it kids? Was it working with kids? Was it mentoring? Was it education? I didn't know. I hadn't explored it because I was on the path to be a lawyer. So that was the hardest thing for me to understand how to do, is to walk away from the formal training that I had gotten and to swerve into something more creative.
And so would your advice be to others, it is important to find your passion in
It
life?
is absolutely important. And I encourage young people to try on different hats. I think it's a shame that kids are forced to figure out so early in their life and get on a path. So I encourage kids to do internships, to work, to talk to people who are doing things that they think are interesting, because most kids are intimidated about approaching you, for example, and saying, Holly, you've done some swerving. Tell me about what you're doing, and having those conversations in high school and in college before you commit to something. But I think kids feel the pressure to have to know what they're going to be.
It's such a young age.
Exactly.
You're 16, 17, 18 when you're making these big life decisions.
Yeah. In one of the first lines in the first chapters, a question that I hate the most that we ask children is, what do you want to be when you grow up? As if growing up is finite, as if you get to a place and at some point that's the end. And that's sort of one of our big dilemmas, that we ask kids so early to figure out who you're going to be at 5 and 7 and 10 and even 20 years old. So I do encourage young people to be open to the swerve and don't beat themselves up if they feel they've maybe not made the right first choice. Because life, Holly, is long. And as you know, we can have many lives within a life. We are always evolving. That is why I called the book Becoming. You know, this notion that we ever stop evolving is just wrong.
Yeah, you didn't call it Become.
That's right, became. Already done that.
So while you were building your incredible career, you were put in charge of an intern, a man that you described as a unicorn, a strange mix of everything man, an exotic geek, and fair to say it was by no means love at first sight, your words, but it did become love for the rest of your life. Is it possible to put that love you feel into words, and has the texture of that love changed over the last 2 decades?
Oh, well, I tried to put it in words, but it is difficult because the love you feel for a partner, it evolves and it has so many different layers. Right? It's the first love that you feel when you're giddy and you're falling, and it's new and it's exciting, and every aspect of that person is fresh. You know, there's that part of the love that's always there, the sort of unpeeling of each other, and that was what first attracted me to Barack, was that